Hey listeners, we're nearing the end of our 15th anniversary fundraising campaign, and we need your help to meet our goal. This campaign offers you a chance to win a unique food and music experience in one of the most exciting cities in America. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and you'll be entered to win dinner for two and 2 tickets to a concert in one of 8 amazing cities: New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and Asheville. All donations support our work educating food system storytellers. And when you donate, you can choose one of those cities and you'll be entered to win dinner and 2 tickets to a show. So help us reach our goal and enter to win dinner and a show in the city of your choice. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by PASA Sustainable Agriculture. Register to attend PASA's 31st annual conference by January 28th at pasafarming.org/conference.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Daniel Eddy. We'll talk to Daniel about the life of a wine-loving chef. We'll taste a Morgon, a Gamay, for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Van Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. New Yorker Daniel Eddy jumped into the food scene in 2004. He bolted New York City after 4 years and hooked up with Daniel Rose at critically acclaimed Spring restaurant in Paris. He eventually headed back to the States to become the opening chef at wine-centric Rebel on the Bowery, where he earned a Michelin star. Walnut Street Cafe in Philly followed. This baguette-obsessed Brooklynite opened his own restaurant, Winter in Park Slope, about a week before the pandemic. Yes, he's still going strong, and has also opened a wine bar restaurant, runner-up. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Daniel.
Hello, hello.
I just want to check some facts on the intro. Were you the opening chef at Rebel?
I was.
It was you. There wasn't somebody before that. And did I miss anything when you came back from the States after working with Daniel? I mean, did you do any short stuff in between, or?
Yeah, I did a short summer up in Martha's Vineyard at my friend's sandwich breakfast joint called 7A Foods. And it was a fun little thing to go from French fine dining to, BLTs and chicken salad sandwiches. But I think it was a precursor for things that came later on.
Well, yeah, ironically, when we get to talking about Winter, there's some similarities there. All right, so to give our listeners a little context about who you are, I want you to give us a brief background. Remember that word, brief. Remember, I prompted you on this off air. Give us a brief background on your journey in food, life, and wine that got you to really where we're sitting today, which is your 2 terrific restaurants, Winner and Runner Up. Before you start, I just want to tell everybody, I'm talking to Daniel in person at his restaurant, Winner and Runner Up. We're sitting upstairs in Park Slope, Brooklyn. All right, so give me that journey.
That journey began at the dinner table, specifically at my father's father, at his kitchen table in East Harlem. And he had gone to World War II and came back after time in France with a newfound love for wine. So wine was always on the dinner table, almost always Vouvray or Sancerre. It just was from his time there. And that's my earliest memory of wine being part of the dinner table. After that, grew up, started working in restaurants. The first place that wine was really present was Nice Matan when I was a server. It was my first restaurant job. And I started as a server there in Nice Matan.
What year are we talking?
We're talking 2003.
Okay.
I think that was that was my first restaurant where wine was a focal point. Now was on the front of the house. So weekly wine meetings, notes that had to be taken, tasting together.
You were part of that.
I was
they brought
part of
you
that.
in.
Yeah, I was there.
Plus, you were interested.
I was
to
interested
hear.
just to, 21-year-old kid starting to like, dabble in the restaurant industry while going to school. Didn't know that I'd end up cooking. But that's sort of what came afterwards. So after Nis Matan, started cooking with Michael Silakis at his Greek restaurants. Wine was also very much a part of his businesses, specifically Greek wine. So that began to sort of expand my understanding of what the scope of wine really was, that it wasn't sort of this minute sort of one thing, but had a big global impact. After that 4 years cooking, that led me to going to Paris, where I worked with Daniel Rose for 3.5 years. And that was a deep dive into really understanding not only wine, but food and wine. And because his focus is so classic French, the importance of allowing the food to support the wine and not try and flip it around really guided a lot of the discussions based around how we build food that's meant to pair with wine and allow the wine to drive the direction of the food and not the other way around. After that, got back to New York City. Patrick Cappiello.
Wait, what's the reason you leave? You realize I don't want to be in France anymore. I've had enough of this. Is there like a weird story behind that?
It's not too weird. I went there with my girlfriend at the time, and we had said 2 years, and then 2 years became 3 years, and 3 years with all of a sudden a 1-year-old. And so, she was like, hey, we have a kid now, we have a family, and I'm here by myself while you're working in the kitchen. That, and I'd also had said from the very beginning that I want to spend my 20s being a student, but when I hit 30, I really want to start going out and doing a restaurant of my own. And that meant coming back to New York City and pursuing that sort of initial dream that I had. As much as I loved Paris, and we both probably could have continued to stay there if I really had wanted to sort of like dig those roots down. But we were already there 3 years. And it was like, if we stay one more year, we're there for another 4 years after. So we left Paris.
Wait, before you get to, you told me you came to, I don't know if you said Pearl and Ash or Rebel, but when you got there, was your skill level up to speed? I mean, did you learn a lot there? Were you kind of lost at the beginning when you left? Were you this sort of French classically trained, hip? Because Daniel's a younger guy, not one of these older guys.
No, when I got there, I was fucked. I moved to Paris not speaking a lick of French. Never having cooked in a French restaurant before. Like, my culinary career up to this point was Greek fine dining with Michael Silakis, as well as like the kefi, like, the sort of more tavern-esque type of food.
So it was culturally
it was language shock, culture shock, food and wine shock.
Right.
Like, all this was foreign to me.
It's great.
And I dove in there like, like that kid who just dives in, doesn't really think of what the consequences might be. But there was this thirst and energy for wanting to learn, and seeing how great of an opportunity Daniel had given me to say, hey, like, you look like you're a kid with a lot of like excitement. I'll give you a visa to come over here, and you're going to help me open up this restaurant, and you're going to work for me for 2 years. And I remember relaying this offer to Elena, and she said, I was like, I don't know, 2 years. I only thought I was going to be here for a year. She's like, you don't say no to that. That's a yes type of answer that you give. And she's like, I'll come with you. And I was like, oh, cool. I got this woman that I fell in love with is going to come with me to Paris, and we're going to start a life there. Like, it was very, I don't know.
But I guess one of the obvious questions is, why wouldn't you do a similar thing like in the States?
Well, that's the funny thing for that was really, there were two things. When I was a green cook, Alain Ducasse came to Michael Silakis' restaurant, and Michael freaked out. He was just, Alain Ducasse was there. I had no idea who Alain Ducasse was. So he's freaking out. He's like losing his shit. Second restaurant comes. I'm on the pasta station. Alain Ducasse comes back. Again, he's going crazy. He's like, this is the best fucking chef in the world. You better fucking make things fucking perfect. And I'm there like, oh my God, like my chef is yelling at me. I have to make this perfect. Otherwise, I'm going to get killed. And at that, I put up my pasta dish. She's like, you're cooking for the best chef in the world. Is it perfect? I was like, yes. He was like, is it perfect? I was like, yes. He's like, okay. And it went out. And, word got back that the plate was wiped clean. And so I was like, cool, I didn't fuck it up. But it led me to say, well, shit, like if Alain Ducasse, this best chef in the world, has interest in my chef to come at least twice to two different restaurants of his, then at least I've teamed up with somebody who's gained the interest of somebody that is of that stature. And I should go and learn from him. So my first trip to Paris was on this belief that I could walk up to one of Alain Ducasse's restaurant, knock on the door and be like, hey, I'm here to do a stage and work for free. I mean, who says no to that? I just wanted to learn. All to say that didn't pan out. I went there and they kind of laughed at me. They're like, do you speak the language? No. They're like, do you have papers? No. I was like, do you have an appointment? I have nothing. I was like, nothing. But that led to me meeting Daniel Rose because a friend of mine had told me, hey, there's an American chef. And I was like, American English, great. Somebody who I can speak to. And so that led to me actually
So the Daniel hookup was not prearranged. You were there and then that came about.
I was there on a whim with no plan. Like I got to Paris and I didn't have a place to stay that night. I was banking on a friend's friend that had like stayed at my place for like 2 weeks. And so I got there with a suitcase and this sort of idea that I was just going to somehow make it happen. And the first 3 months went with just me kind of roaming the streets of Paris and engaging with the culture to the best that I could and making some friends. And it wasn't until I believe January that I finally got into the door at Spring when it was the 18-seat little restaurant in the ninth. And Daniel was like, I don't have space for you. You know, I already have one stagiaire. And I continued to pester him. And it led to actually me working with him for the following 3 months. And it was in those 3 months, he was like, hey, do you want to move back to Paris and help me open up this new venture? And that's when it became permanent.
That's interesting. All right. So you eventually leave that. We know why. You come back to the States. And where do you land?
Martha's Vineyard. There for about 6 months for the summer, from May of 2013 to like October of 2013. And then I moved back to the city and almost was immediately introduced to Patrick and Brandon, who were operating Pearl and Ash at that point in time.
Do you remember who the intro was with?
Yeah, it was my friend Josh Fontaine is good friends with Zev Roving, and Zev and Patrick were talking, and they said, hey, I want to open up a restaurant. We're looking for a French chef. Zev spoke to Josh. Josh was like, hey, I know this American kid who was here for the last 3 years working in this French restaurant called Spring. He just moved back to his city, New York.
Did they know about Spring?
Josh, of course.
The hybrid coming in is, this guy's worth a shot right away. I mean, did they put you through some crap or?
No, I think that we really went kind of like on a sort of, hey, this is kind of, who could have planned this one out, you know? It's sort of like mutual friends connecting us, both coming back with similar interests. I was coming back to New York. Yeah, and I was coming back specifically because I wanted to open up a restaurant. So here was a kind of straight shot for it. And so we began talking. I think it was like October, November of 2013. And then it took almost another 6 months to find a space, and then 9 months to build out a restaurant. And then
this is Pearl and Ash.
No, this is Rebel.
This is Rebel.
Yeah,
Pearl and Ash was running already.
Pearl and Ash was already running, and that's what sort of built the interest on their part to open up another venture.
Now, Rebel is a wine-centric restaurant with food. How was it presented to you?
Presentation was, hey, we want to do a restaurant. We want to capture a bit of what has been happening in Paris here in New York. What do you think?
A little taste of Paris.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer, right?
Everything sounds great on paper. And then New York City comes into play and you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah, it's different. All right, so you're at Rebel. Your tenure there is how long?
3 years, just about.
And you nail a Michelin star, which is pretty amazing for that. You think of Michelin stars as like Per Se and Midtown and all that crap. Here's the Bowery. Here's, like I said, a wine-centric bar. Here's a guy nobody really heard of, and, you nail the star. How long into the 3 years was that? Towards the middle, the end?
No, we opened up April of 2015, and I think it was that August we got the star, so like 4 or 5 months in. Yeah, I mean, it was... the intention was never to try and get a star. That's never kind of been my interest. No,
I don't see you as that. I mean, it happens.
It happens. And, I think it was nice to sort of get recognition that
I think, like I said, the Michelin star and a Bowery, that's the cool part. It's sort of an antithesis.
The crazy part, though, it's like, you put things into categories, and a Michelin star for a French restaurant means much different than a Michelin star for, say, Uncle Boone's, who was around the corner from us, who was crushing it all the time.
Right.
But from the public perception, it's sort of, I think that people still see French as being something that is elevated. Even if your intention is not that, it still can be perceived that way, which can alienate a lot of people. I've always kind of thought that there was a certain part there was a downside to the Michelin star, that it took away the accessibility that we had hoped for, because all of a sudden it put us on this path where it's like, well, if you have 1 star, then you must be going for 2. And if you're going for 2, then you should probably go for 3. But to just be...
How about if you're a neighborhood guy and you go there once or twice a week, the star hits, now everybody from all over Westchester, Long Island's coming in, you can't get a table. That's the guy who got you to the game. Know, now, I mean, it's all fun. All right. So my understanding, because I've known you a while and I've known Patrick a while, is the Rebel thing was a good run, but it came to an end because of landlord or lease or...
a combination of it all.
Yeah.
Just the straight up financials.
I mean,
of
you didn't
a business.
plan for it to
no
shut down when it did.
No, I don't think that anybody plans for anything to shut down. But it's also important to go into this industry, especially in New York City, understanding that the longevity is a pursuit, not a guarantee. And that more often than not, like if you just look at the numbers, if you make it, past those like 5 years, like, yo, wow, you're golden. If you make it past a year, it's like, if you make it past 2 years and you can make a lot of people happy,
2.
yeah.
Yep.
And sometimes the numbers just aren't there,
All right, so Rebel comes to an end, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I felt that way. I'm sure you did. What happens then? You guys, for some reason, head into Philly.
Funny enough, though, Philly came about because of wine. There was a group of guys who were having dinner at Rebel one night and having a blast, and I'm on my way sort of out the door, and one of the guys jumps up from the table and he grabs me. He's like, hey, we've had such a great time. The food's incredible. We loved it so much. We actually just bought a Magnum down. We just bought a Magnum to take on the car ride back down to Philadelphia. He's like, you don't have any plastic cups that we could take? And I see these guys. I was like, I'll do you one better. And I went and I got him like a case of wine glasses. I was like, you bought a Magnum, take the wine glasses, enjoy it, on the car ride down. And that led to the gentleman reaching back out saying, hey, just want to follow up. I had a great time. I'm working on a project in Philadelphia and would love to sort of talk to you guys about it, see if there's any interest on your part. And so that conversation started, and it presented an opportunity for me to learn something that I didn't know how to do, and that was to build something that could be independent of me, where I didn't have to be there 7 days a week, to sort of learn how to better delegate and put systems in place, because otherwise I was going to continue down this path that I was on, where it was like, I'm working 6 days a week, if not 7. I'm putting my family, my son, my partner, I'm putting them secondary to the business. And it wasn't something that I wanted for my future. I wanted to learn how to delegate these responsibilities, how to build something that could be sustainable without my everyday presence. And that's something that was worth enough to explore the opportunity to do so, because it was something that I had never done before.
And it worked.
It worked, yeah.
I would assume you were down there, you designed the menu, you trained people, and then you were back and forth, right?
Yeah, I was back and forth, and it was grueling for some months, where I would do breakfast and lunch in Philadelphia and then go back to New York City to do dinner service. And after dinner service, I'd run to the train to get back on the train to be back down to Philadelphia to repeat this cycle. And it taught me a lot. And I was able to do that because I knew that there was also like a 6-month window where it was going to be really intense, but that 6-month investment would pay, off down the line. And, I'm happy to say that Walnut Street Cafe is still up and running.
So I should have asked you this off air. Are you still affiliated, or you're out of there?
I'm out of there. I haven't been back down in 2 years.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
When and if there's ever anything that, I can contribute towards, like, everyone's got my number and they can call me if, I need to go down there and look at the operation. Sure. But, the chef de cuisine down there, Jack, has been running the show for the last 3 years and been doing a great job. And so I kind of go by the no news is good news.
Right. In this business. All right, so between then and winter, just walk me through that. Don't get into the details of winter, because I want to talk to you that later in the interview. But how did we get here? Just like the guy bought a Magnum. How did this location?
So I guess concept? That was 2017 is when we opened up. And by the end of that year, my obligation to that kind of came to an end of having to be there as often as I did. It was then I have to go down like once every month. But it allowed me finally to get to the time to be removed from a restaurant, to be a father, to be like, just a present partner, and to make up for some of that lost time, spending time with my family, spending time with my friends, and beginning to sort of think about what my career, what I wanted it to look like. What did I want to do for myself, and how could I find a balance between the professional and the personal? Because I hadn't yet really achieved that. I went from 2 states, 2 restaurants to no restaurants and being present, but that also itself isn't sustainable. So it was, okay, how do I then position myself into having a business that can now run independent of me, and can allow me to go away for the weekend with my wife and kid and not worry about Saturday night service. And so it took, a year of sort of processing what that would look like. And in that year, I was anchored down here in Park Slope in the community where, I've been living since 2014, and kind of began to assess what were the needs that I felt they were here, and a lot of those because I was living in the neighborhood. So I was like, oh, this is what I miss. A lot of it was also built around the nostalgia and my longing for the life that I had in Paris, and some of these things that we often lose out here. Simple things like just a good loaf of bread that's coming hot out the oven.
Good cup of coffee.
A good roast chicken.
Simple pastry.
Yeah. And so in that time, I started exploring the idea of, okay, well, what's something that I can build, and that's something that potentially has the opportunity for scale, and what's something that's also, not seasonal. So the idea of a roast chicken came about.
So when did you open?
Official opening date of winter, March 9th, Monday, March 9th, 2020.
All right, so stop right there, okay? Because we're going to come back to that. How much lag time was there before you opened winter? I mean, how much were you contemplating, thinking, figuring out the gaps that you needed to fill?
A solid year. And then in May of 2019, I came across the space that had a for rent sign up. And
is that where we're sitting?
That's where we're sitting, yeah.
Okay.
And from May up until October, it was negotiating and talking to the landlord and trying to convince him that, I was the person that, he should give this space to. And obviously then the market was very competitive. He had a lot of offers coming in. I initially had approached him just about the 400 square foot carriage house space, where I was like, I just want to put a rotisserie in there and have a tiny little 16-seat wine bar.
Is the carriage runner-up?
The carriage is
All right,
runner-up.
We'll explain that to everyone. It's crazy that if you want to do stuff and you're sort of in a rush or you're anxious, you're screwed, because the process is the process and people will deal,
Yeah.
You have to kind of bite your lip, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into that a little. So we're sitting here, it's almost 2 years after the pandemic, right? And we were hoping 2 years later, we'd be kind of okay. We're still dealing with Omicron, right? I'm starting to get sick about talking about COVID on the podcast. But the reason I want to talk about it with you is you have a unique story, which you kind of set up for me. After all the looking around and figuring out what to open and dicking around with the landlord, you opened the place up when again?
March 9th,
And when did
2020.
COVID hit? Like more 7 days later?
Not even. That was Monday. By Thursday, I stopped allowing people inside because I was reading the signs. First case hit, I think, New York City that Friday. And by Sunday, it was the full shutdown. And so at that point, I hadn't even had one full week of operation before the city just went done.
What goes through your mind? Like it's over before it started? I can get through this. What sort of unknown? I mean, what are those? Because I mean, a lot of people tell you they opened during the pandemic or right after. I mean, you shot it to the week.
Yeah.
So what do you? Am I screwed? What?
think that my reaction was probably something along the lines of, fuck.
It was.
There were so many unknowns. And then the following few weeks was just operating in this sort of gray space of, am I breaking the law right now by being open?
All the regulations.
I had no idea.
That part drove you crazy.
Nobody knew.
They knew nothing about the virus. They knew nothing of what to do. And you as a businessman tried to be a good citizen, but what? Right?
So that Monday, my wife and my son left. We said, hey, we'll see you in a couple of weeks when this thing dies down. It was better. We said, better that you guys get out of the city, go up to, your father in Connecticut, hang out over there. And then once this sort of dies down, we'll see each other again. But for me to be going back and forth, it seems to be, I'm putting you guys at risk. And this is before vaccines. This is when things are just beginning to ramp up.
Or anything.
And, that 2-week time that we had spoken about turned into 5 months.
So it's nice to hear that 5 months later you're still standing. And I think a few of the things I want you to talk about is, I guess you got your feet on the ground and you figured it out. You started innovating a little. You went to the window. You brought in guest chefs. Tell me about some of the stuff, that kept you in the game.
I think I got really lucky. I got lucky in a lot of ways. And that's one of the things that I think that isn't often spoken about in the city, just when it comes to the hospitality industry, is how much luck is a factor. One, I got super lucky with having an incredibly talented team with me. My head baker, my head pastry chef, they're just incredible individuals. The model that was also built before the pandemic hit was exactly what we ended up offering, even down to the family meal. The only pivot being that instead of doing it all in-house, we then started inviting friends who were unemployed, who were at home going stir crazy, and telling them, hey, come over here, cook for a week, get out of the house, don't lose your mind, don't lose crazy. And that and not allowing people inside anymore were the two biggest changes. But other than that, like the coffee menu, the pastry menu, the bread menu, the sandwich menu, all those things, the rotisserie chicken menu, all those things were things that were built around this idea because I'd already experienced failure once. Rebel was a restaurant that failed, in part because we never maximized the utility of the space. To open up a dinner-only restaurant is hard. To open up a dinner-only restaurant that's almost 120 seats with an over $30,000 a month rent is really hard. And so for me, especially since this was, all my family and investing into this project, I was like, I need to figure out how to make this work. And that means trying to generate as much revenue as I can throughout the entirety of the day. And if that means $100 every hour, then hell, I'd rather have $100 every hour than try and make $1,000 in 1 hour. And so,
but it was perfectly set up for that.
Yeah.
The baking, the pastries, that morphs into a good lunch.
Yeah.
The dinner, the chicken. That's people yearned for that during.
And that was also so much of that schedule was done out of restriction because, we have a small bread oven. So we can only bake off X amount of things before we had to bake something else off. So it wasn't that we were trying to be annoying. It was just this is the space that we have and this is what we can fabricate. And as a byproduct of the shutdown, it forced everyone to stay here in the neighborhood. People who would otherwise commute into the city and say, never mind, I'm not going to try that place. I have to get to work. We're here landlocked in their neighborhood and then going stir crazy at the house. So they're like, oh, well, okay, sourdough comes out at 11, special sourdough comes out at 12, focaccia comes out at 1, sandwiches start at 11, pastries are only up until 11 and they don't sell any pastries after that. So it gave people multiple excuses to get out the house and come and try something at its peak. We're like, hey, baguettes are coming out in 15 minutes. We were like, okay, I'll take 2 and I'll wait right here. And the baguettes would come out the oven. They go, fuck, that's hot. I'm like, yeah, it just came out the oven.
I think the neighborhood too. You really have a neighborhood. You made a good point with Rebel that it was basically a wine dinner place. I'm not sure that neighborhood is entrenched, with a community like this. Maybe. I don't know. New York City.
Yeah. I know that my son goes to school here. I know that there's 6 other public schools in and around here. So that kind of leads me to believe that, we have a lot of families and families mean sort of anchors that are dropped into these grounds and that creates
They came out of the buildings.
Yeah.
So you hung in there. It's it's more than what we say. I mean, it's your offerings. I mean, the breads, the pastries are unbelievable. They're unique, not to the neighborhood, but they're unique in the sense that they're as good as anything. You know, the chicken dinner, who doesn't like chicken? Chicken well made is, even better. Everybody's used, to dry chicken. Any realizations? I mean, did you learn anything from the pandemic? I mean, when you take pause, do you sit there and do you appreciate employees more?
Oh,
Do you
of course.
run your business differently? I mean, anything come to mind?
So, pandemic hit mid-March. Mid-April, my mom was diagnosed with cancer.
Mid-April of 2020?
Yeah.
The
so
pandemic year?
Yeah, a month after the pandemic, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And the next months were us trying to sort of navigate her diagnosis along with the pandemic, trying to figure out how to, get her to the hospitals, how to keep her safe as she tried to fight this fight that we were told from the very beginning was going to be a losing one. And so it wasn't until August that we were able to actually get her out the city. And so in August, we got my mom out the city, my sister and I, and finally reunited with my mom, with my wife, my partner Elena, and my son Enzo. And so we all got together finally. And then that was after 5 months of not seeing them. And we all went back up to the vineyard, and we were there from August up until her passing in February. January 30th actually was the day that she passed. So in that time, I left the business that had just opened in the hands of the staff that, had come to start to make this happen. It was that moment where I kind of just was like, you know what, like I have only this amount of time left with her. And so the business, trust the people that I've put in place to run it, and to know that I'm only a phone call away and that I'll try and come down periodically. But, I have X amount of time with my mom, and that's going to take priority over the business's success or failure. And in that time, it's the team not only held it down, but caused this growth to occur that I wasn't a witness to. To leave in August and then to come back and just get snippets of all the things that have been happening, and to come back then in February and see this sort of transformation that had occurred over the course of the first year of opening to what it had become. The credit is really theirs,
Well, things trickle down from you and your vision and who you are and how you handle them. But it also proves that it trickles back up, how they did it. And it's not entirely luck or coincidence. It's a little of that. I mean, it's good people that are committed to you to them to, doing the right thing.
And so, so that's the appreciation of employees.
I mean, that's beyond pandemic. Your
Yeah.
mom thing alone,
Yeah.
with or without.
So, the priority of this business has to be the employees. It's because of them that the place is where it is now. It's the reason that I was able to have the time that I had. It's like I try and do everything that I can right now to improve that quality of life for the staff. And there are growing pains, there are mistakes, but there's always this interest that I have in hearing directly from them and hearing them where things can improve. I need and flourish off of that constructive criticism. And sometimes it's hard to hear because no one ever wants to hear that you've, fallen short. But you need to hear that stuff in order to improve and build upon that.
Right. It sounds like balance is important. When you started, it's like 60, 80 hours a week in some crazy kitchen. Then as time went by, as you talked about it, like in Philly, being able to be away from it and run it, learning how to run it, that's important here, but also recognizing, your people, which in the end is really, what this business is all about. So we're not out of the woods.
No.
But you figured out a way to, keep things going, obviously. I mean, I walked in here, there's a line out the door, and it was 11 in the morning. We're not even talking, the coffee hour passed, lunch hasn't hit yet, and dinner. So, I mean, that's pretty good. All right, I wanted to check you on something else. You had alluded to it a little, but as you were working in the business, you know, you've been cooking for almost 2 decades.
Fuck.
I know, and you're a young guy. You were exposed and understood wine through your grandfather. I guess being in France helped because culturally there. When did you realize, you know, that wine was sort of an important thing to the business, to you? I mean, you talked about it a little. You know, it's definitely...
Well, definitely my time at Spring and working with Daniel Rose, that was the...
Wine and food. I wouldn't say equally important, but part of the mojo.
That's where it was understood that both were intertwined, that they kind of lived this sort of symbiotic relationship. And it was a constant discussion, not only within the workplace, but in the culture outside of the workplace. You know, I think that of the 3 years that I was there, I probably had 6 beers. I can't count the amount of bottles of wine that we had, but there was always a conversation, and it was something that it was part of the dialogue at the end of the shift when we go to another friend's restaurant and we'd open up magnums of...
So you were inquisitive, you were drinking, you took advantage.
The culture was there.
Any influences? Like, was there 1 or 2 guys you look back that dragged you around? Was it Daniel Rose? I mean...
Daniel Rose definitely within the workplace was very much like...
Was Daniel a wine guy?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, his knowledge is incredible when it comes to wine, and so much of that importance was sort of him sort of imparting that on me. It's like, hey, try this, taste this. How does this work with the sauce? What doesn't work? How do we treat this piece of food differently so it can work better with this? What's the herb? What's the zest? And all these things were always like, hey, the wine that's in the glass is the wine that's in the glass. The food you can tweak to make it go better with that. And that was how the food was very often constructed there.
So it's fair to say great chefs constructed food, but not with an eye towards or the appreciation of wine as a complement or companion, right?
And I think that's one of the things.
So you walked out of there.
I walked out of there with that sort of foundation. And it then got only furthered working with Patrick, because Patrick...
I was going to say, I mean, it's almost like you sought out the right guy. I mean... Did you realize after the match was so good, or you knew a little going in? I mean, Patrick had a good resume going into Rebel.
Going into it, too, just sort of seeing his enthusiasm about the wine and his sort of love for food was very evident that there was a lot of opportunity to sort of further that education when it came to like doing the cooking and wine videos that we did together, or the Rebel Winemaker series, where it was like inviting different winemakers to highlight their
I attended a bunch. I mean,
it was
they
an
were
incredible...
very tight. The menu was tight. The service was tight. The food, the wine, you know, it was really. It wasn't a. It was a casual place, but it was done well.
Yeah, it's
you know,
casual, but like, you know, we take our shit seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you felt that, you know, when to the curls of the Comte. You know? I mean, it's crazy. So Rebel was sort of an extension of, you know, how they thought about it in France, which was a nice thing, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's where the name sort of came out, you know. That's when we were sort of brainstorming of what the names of the restaurant could be, you know. It's sort of, for me, I wanted it, you know, it was Rebel, you know, it was French, but rebelling against this idea of what a French restaurant had to be in New York City. Was on the Bowery, but it had a banging wine list. The food was rooted in a lot of classics and a lot of the things that I learned from Daniel Rose, but trying to sort of take a bit of ownership from that while still adhering and respecting all that I had learned in the 3.5 years of working with him. And so there was that extension of my time, and that was the idea from the beginning. They wanted to do a sort of French restaurant that tipped its hat to Paris. And I wanted to sort of find a place that I could begin to really explore my own voice within the food.
The space was amazing, too.
It was fucking huge, man.
I mean, you walked in, the bar was on the left, it went down, the kitchen in the back. I mean, it's like you got to lie in bed and dream about that. You don't have enough space to make baguettes. right, listen, we're talking to Daniel Eddy. We have to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to talk to Daniel about his current restaurants and what he's doing. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network.
This episode is brought to you by PASA Sustainable Agriculture. For 30 years, PASA's conference has served as a springboard for transformative food system change. PASA's 2022 conference features more than 30 virtual and 90 in-person sessions on farming and food systems, covering topics that include building community food webs, keeping seeds to preserve cultural traditions, protecting local watersheds, as well as production methods and business skills for food producers of all levels. Keynote speakers include Soulfire Farms' Leah Penniman, author of Farming While Black, Sarah Mock, author of Farm and Other F-Words, and Jessica Gordon Nemhard, author of Collective Courage, A History of African American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice. PASA's virtual pre-conference takes place January 4th through 28th. Register anytime to attend live or get recordings. You can also join PASA in Lancaster, Pennsylvania on February 10th through 12th for its in-person main conference. Comprehensive COVID safety measures will be in place. Learn more and register at pasafarming.org/conference. That's PASA farming.org/conference.
All right, we're back. We're back with my guest, Daniel Eddy. Daniel is the proprietor of Winner and Runner Up, and I want to talk to you about that now. So let's talk about your restaurants, Winner and Runner Up. You alluded to this. I guess it's every chef's dream to own his own place. I mean, there's that handful of guys that don't, but I mean, is that what you set out to do?
Yeah, definitely what I set out to do. I wanted to have a place that I could, uniquely call my own, to sort of decide the location, decide the name, decide how the structure would be best suited for the neighborhood, and how to exist within it, and kind of be that person to make those decisions that up until this project, I had to sort of work with others to do so. But I still hadn't found that opportunity to sort of have a place that felt representative of who I was and what I wanted to put forth.
Well, it seems like we talked it through, but the restaurant is a representation of everything behind you and taking all the good things, and putting them here. The further wine service at Rebelle, the classic French training in Paris, the Paris vibe wines, right? Isn't that all here?
The sandwiches made out in Martha's Vineyard,
Right. It's all right, which is, this is very casual. But tell me this, I think I stumbled on this. Was it your idea to open Runner Up first? Was that the concept, or was it always Winner, or...
No, that came down to just sort of logistics. I didn't have a liquor license when I first got the space, so I had to go through the whole application process.
But knowing you wanted it and you'd get it?
Yeah, that was always...
you didn't want a restaurant without a liquor license.
No, the financials didn't make sense to me without having that revenue stream. I couldn't do a strictly food operation. But what I could do was start off with what is often the hardest thing to do, and that's like the revenue stream from 7:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock, or even 5:30. So I figured that if I can make the business sustain itself based on the hard part, that the food and wine in the evening would be supplemental to that.
I mean, it's not brilliant. It's just so logical, right?
And the hand was forced. Like I didn't have the privilege of having, a deep bank account that I could keep on drawing for. Like I had a finite amount that I had to make this happen. So, when I signed the lease in October, I got in there the next day and started doing all the demolition work myself. I didn't have outside contractors. I had to do that shit on my own because that's just what it was. I had to decide how this was going to happen. And, part of me not getting the liquor license in the beginning was because I also didn't have the money actually to pay for the liquor license. So I had to prioritize all these other things first before I could get to that point. And that led to the opening of the bakery before the restaurant.
So just to put things chronologically. You opened the bakery so that you could take advantage of the day, create revenue. The chicken wasn't available right away.
No, not because I also didn't have the rotisserie in yet. So
Right.
in the beginning, we actually were doing like a similar chicken to what we did at Rebel, where it was like fully deboned and
But
roasted
it wasn't
whole.
a rotisserie.
It wasn't a rotisserie. And we did the Friends and Family Meal series kind of a month after opening. And that was also,
Was that a COVID reason, or you were going to do
well,
that?
I had always planned on doing family meal. The
Right.
same thing. I had the frustrations of going to the neighborhood, trying to go to a restaurant, waiting 30 minutes before the food hit, because we also had to make the decisions, and also spending 3 times more than I would want to. So the idea was family meal was going to be $17. You get what you get and you don't get upset. That was like
Right.
the phrase here in the neighborhood that I've always heard. So, if it was pasta day and we had tortellini, that's what was for dinner. You come in, you pay $17, you eat, you get out.
It seems like it worked. Now, I want to talk to you a little about the wine program and the list, and a little more about Runner Up. But I got to tell you, man, and I don't like toot everyone's horn, but that's like some of the best damn chicken I've ever eaten. I mean, I make chicken all the time and I eat it everywhere, but I don't know what it is. Is it because it's rotisserie? Does rotisserie give you? I know it's timing and seasoning, but just give me a couple of tips here, please.
Dude, I don't know. I can't. There's nothing else to say except that it's like it feels like a very straightforward thing for me. There aren't any like deep secrets. It's a great quality bird, salted,
Salted, great quality,
seasoned for 48 hours, and then we roast
So wait,
it.
I salt it, put it in the fridge.
2 days later.
No brining, just
No
salt
brining,
on
just
it?
salt.
No pepper,
No pepper.
because that's bitter or whatever.
No, it's not that. It's just I just
All right,
decided.
then what happens?
And
I
then,
take the chicken out.
We take the chicken out. Here we
You skewer it up on the rotisserie.
and then we roast it, and we roast it.
Are you adding anything, or it's just dripping its own juices?
Stripping in its own juices. We actually we brush a little bit of like smoked honey on top, just
Smoked honey.
And that was as a result of the first chicken version that we're doing.
Not heavy hand on the smoked
No,
honey.
no. It's like
because
no, it's not like we're not like lacquering it up. It's just like a quick rub, just to help to accelerate some of the.
and then you.
And then we just roast it and we take it off.
So a
and
3-pound chicken, does a 3-pound chicken have an average cooking time? What time am I spinning this thing?
we are here 50 minutes.
50, somewhere in that range.
50 minutes, 30 minutes at 350, and then we drop it down to 160 and let that go for another 20 minutes, and then let it cool down.
50 plus 20?
No, 30 plus 20.
30 plus. All right. I know
And
we're
so,
spending a lot of time on the chicken, but that's for me.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll edit it out. But all right. And then I'm not editing it out. And then you make your own chimichurri. Is it a chimichurri sauce, or is it a green? Is it a salsa verde?
We call it a salsa verde, but it also has like grainy mustard in there, and shallots and herbs and olive oil.
What are the greens? Is that like parsley, cilantro?
Green herbs, yeah. Well,
Okay.
no cilantro, but parsley. We get a bit of dill in here, tarragon, chives.
So some classics,
classics,
herbs,
yeah.
French, but-
Yeah. There's a
And
certain
then
desire that I
olive
really,
oil.
olive oil in there. Yeah, and there's a certain like decision that I made that I want to keep the chicken neutral, because I wanted to kind of promote this idea that like we have all these other sauces that we make, that the hope is that people can grab a sauce, grab a chicken, and kind of then do the last part of their meal with that. So, you can get the romesco with the almonds and then just make some potatoes at home, or you can get the curry sauce and cook some rice at home. And so it just cuts down on the labor of cooking a lot of the food, because this came out of a thing of convenience. Like families coming back from, both families are, parents working, having to pick up their kids, trying to put food on the table, go to the supermarket, get a roast chicken, or it's sold out there. It's just like, give a better option.
I was just going to say, give them a better option. Give them a better chicken. All right. So I'm going to, off air, I'm going to put you in a headlock and get the specific ingredients for the salsa verde. But we'll deal with that later, because I don't want to scare you away for the rest of the interview, right? All right. So I'm a little confused. Help me. So Runner Up came after. I know that because Winter's been up, and I was at Runner Up in the summer, and I guess it recently opened. Was it always in the sights going after that liquor license to have a separate place? Because in essence, there's a a separate space, for runner-up.
Initially, it was all just going to be called winner and fall into the same thing.
Okay.
But because of the pandemic and the duration of time that it took to actually get open, I figured that it would end up being a little bit too complicated to try and sort of express to the public one more thing that Winter was doing on top of already 12 hours of programming, and that it would be better suited to give it its own identity. And we were all brainstorming, and my pastry chef, Ali Spar, she's like, I got an idea. She's like, you should call it Runner Up. And I was like, done. Like, there was
awesome.
She
name.
nailed the name.
It's perfect.
The food content that she wanted to put up there was still a little questionable.
You didn't agree.
I was like, I don't know about that. I was like, I'll give you the name, but the corn dogs are not going to happen.
I don't know. I mean, I to you, I get what you're saying, but that may have worked. You knew they'd be the best corn dog anybody tasted.
Corn dogs and wine.
Yeah. All right. So here's your opportunity now to bring, what you love to what you've been doing, which is have wine and food, and all of that. Let's talk about the wine. I mean, a big thing these days is a smaller, tight wine list. I think that makes sense for you because you don't have this big, massive place. You probably don't have a place to store all the wine. So what's your thinking on what you're going to do with the wine list? Do you lay it off on somebody? Are you involved with it? How do you put the list together?
No, in the very beginning, I was putting together, with the assistance of my general manager, Marshall Vickers, who was part of the Pearl and Ash and Rebel team. He had a big part in the wine there and then continued on working within wine. So the two of us started really building it together in the very beginning. I always had a clear vision of what I wanted. I wanted a cheap and cheerful list that was going to be easy and accessible for the neighborhood and for myself and for my friends and my peers. The one thing that I learned about Park Slope is that Park Slope is a neighborhood that's very well educated when it comes to wine. Slope Cellars is just a couple blocks away, and they were one of the reasons that I was happy to move to Park Slope. As a kid who grew up in East Harlem, living in Park Slope was the last place I ever fucking thought that I'd be living. But, you have a kid, you have a partner, you don't get the say anymore, even if you are the New Yorker and you try and lay, state claim to that. But, we came to Park Slope and I met Patty and Ben at Slope Cellars and saw the wines that they were serving over there, that was on the shelf. And it evoked all of my memories of living in Paris and what I was seeing. I was thrilled to see some of the producers that I saw there. And so that was in 2014. Fast forward 6 years later, I've seen what the public in this neighborhood has bought, and they drink really well based on just
so let's talk
that
about
success.
That. This is a pretty good example, of a New York neighborhood. It could be a microcosm. What are people looking for here? Like, what are they drinking? Is it European-centric? Is it French-centric? Does it skew? Like, is there a heavy ask and push for natural wines? Is it that hipster, do you have orange wine? What is it?
No, one of the things that I was very pleased, and again, like, I can only speak, like, I'm kind of a loyalist. Like, I go to Slope Cellars and I don't buy any wine anywhere else in the neighborhood because that's my shop. That's where I go. I know everybody there. And so I can only say to what they offer there. And there's definitely been a progression of the wine that has gotten, it was great then. It's even better now, and it's just looking at the quality of producers, new producers. It's definitely, I think, European centric, although they do look at a lot of the American winemakers as well.
Right, which is growing, and there's some good people that you don't want to sort of ignore.
Exactly. And so but smaller, interesting producers. Yeah, smaller,
stories,
stories and ones that they could they also are just delicious. I think that
those tend to be guys that are focusing towards viticulture, a little more towards sustainability, natural. Would you agree? Not coincidentally,
yeah, I would agree.
That's what a lot of.
I would agree, and not only that, but that was also very much of what I was present in my time living in Paris. I was in Paris. My first stint there was from 2008 into 2009, and then it was from 2010 to 2013. And that was also a big sort of resurgence of natural winemaking, not in the way that a lot of people sort of like to say natural to be now, where it's, pure mouse and all skunk and not like we're talking about properly made, properly farmed, minimal use of any sulfites or only used when needed. working the land and not getting the pesticides to do the work for you.
And it goes even beyond taking care of your workers, not just the soil, but the people, that do all of it. I mean, it's nice to hear all of that. So let's close our eyes for a second. Somebody comes to winter, they can get awesome breads, they can get a chicken dinner. Eventually, when things ease up, they could sit down. They come to Runner Up. Describe Runner Up to me. It's a restaurant, wine bar, small, intimate. We just talked about the list, the food.
The space itself, the idea was to have a place similar to a place like Le Vent Comptoir in Paris, like this 8 standing room person, people crammed into a sardine can, like standing room only, just
But
kind of
always
like
people standing there.
standing, exactly, just standing and just like drinking wine, spilling out into the street. A place like Aux Deux Amis, that was really the vision that I had for Runner Up. Obviously, 16 people in a 200 square foot room isn't really the idea for people what are gravitating towards in today's day and age. But, with the pandemic came outdoor seating. With outdoor seating, there came a lot of ambiguity of how we're supposed to operate and what we can do and can't do. Hopefully that will all be clarified and we can improve upon that. But
so you'll get
the
to
intention is still the same. It's a place you can come and have a delicious meal that can be counted on just being good, and it's going to, and a strong wine list that you can come in and, either have a glass or have a bottle, and that you can find something cheap and cheerful, or if you're looking for a special event, that you can look to the 86 list and find a gem within that.
Easier said than done, but you're doing it. I remember we were here for a wine dinner and we stayed after and we started pulling wines off the list, which is pretty nice. Couple things. I want to get to our wine list. I want to ask about some of your preferences in wine. But a lot of our friends, guys like James O'Brien, Annie and the girls at King, they're all starting to expand into serious stuff. Are you thinking that, or you just want to get settled with what you have? Because I'm no restaurant consultant, but you certainly could use some space.
No, and that's actually been a cause for an expansion that's happening, this coming year. Somebody had shared with me a post that Prospect Park Alliance was accepting RFPs to spaces in Prospect Park, and I submitted one, and without detailing or giving away too much, it got accepted. So that led for the opportunity for me to do a project in Prospect Park.
This is going forward?
This is going forward. This is going to be this coming summer. So with that came the realization that we have already kind of reached the capacity of the space here at Winter. So there is expansion, but it's all kind of occurring more out of necessity and less on a want. My want would be to not have to grow and just grow the space physically, but because the walls are brick and mortar, I can't expand them. So it has caused this sort of opportunity for us to expand and make space so that the departments that are here that have seen this business grow from what it was initially thought that it would do to what it's currently doing have actually space to work and not crawl on top of one another.
Right.
Because that also really detracts from the allure of working in a place. If you're uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable. It doesn't matter how nice everybody is. If it sucks, it sucks.
It'll get to you.
Yeah, and it'll get to you. And so in that same effort of wanting to improve the space, because I know what that does to people's own mental health, we have to sort of now make this thing happen. And I feel fortunate to be in the position that I can look at my business and say, hey, we've reached its limit and now we have to expand. And now it's just making sure that the decisions that are made moving forward are the correct ones and they're made for the right reasons, and that we really look at what the needs are and then put the wants on the back burner.
I like to hear that, because the more people you can get food in their mouths, the better job you're doing with the stuff that you're putting in their mouths. So it's good to hear that. We'll keep in touch with you on that, see where everything happens. All right. We don't have a ton of time. I want to do two things. I want to do the wine list, and I want to do a quickly weekly wine sip. While you're going to start contemplating the wine list, open up the wine. Let's drink that. Let's talk about it and how that fits in on the vibe of what you're doing. All right, so the wine list, 5 questions, same 5 questions to everybody. We've done over 200 of these. Okay, people way more famous than you have answered it. No, just kidding. All right, so here's the first question: what are you drinking now? Now we're going to be drinking a Morgone, but like when you go to the wine store or in your frigid home, or you have a little downtime with what are you going to drink?
It's dry January, man.
Screw that. Dry Riesling.
Dry Riesling.
Yeah.
No, I in the end, I've been deferring very much. I go to Slope Cellars still, even though I have a full wine list over here. I kind of want to go over there as much as I can. And
so what's popping up now? You know, what's more now than normal? Or
one of the new staff members that's been there now for a while, Alejandra. She used to work over at Romans. She's now been working at Slope Cellars. She's been putting me onto a lot of Italian wines that I haven't had as of late. And my partner being Italian and from Milano, it's sort of like it's nice to sort of go back to sort of her own roots and start looking at. Are
we talking Langhe, Barolo, or are we talking Tuscan, Chianti?
No. Going on the sort of lighter, fresher northern wines. Looking at some
Alto Piemonte.
Yeah, looking at some of that over there. We've spent a bit of time up in Dolon, up in like Monte Bianco area, and so there's a lot of wonderful winemakers up there that we've been enjoying. So yeah, Italians as of late, and that's been sort of as a desire of wanting to get a better understanding.
And you're not there yet. You need to drink through.
Yeah,
and you're liking what you're drinking.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a good one. This is the silliest question of the bunch, but you're a food and you're a wine guy. So give me not the best, your favorite wine and food pairing. You probably don't eat it every night. You probably don't even cook it all the time. But what's that? This works.
Oysters and Chenin.
I forgot to tell you, we have a rule. You're not allowed to say oysters and champagne.
Oh, really?
But yeah, because that's obvious. But shout out to Chenin that it's a great wine, with oysters.
Yeah.
I mean, everything goes well. I mean, the oysters are in that region, the wine's there, the salinity.
I didn't know that was a rule that you could do that. But listen, it's like, it's the dead of winter. It's when oysters are sometimes its best, but it's also contrary to necessarily like, we're drinking a red wine right now because it feels appropriate.
So I had Peter Lehmann, the champagne expert, last week, and I asked him the same question, and I'm like, okay. Peter's like this deep sea diver, lives in France. He's been everywhere. I'm waiting to hear his wine and food thing. His answer, he was one step away from oysters and champagne. Champagne and fried chicken.
Yeah.
Which has come up on this show, a lot. But that was fun.
That's what we did for New Year's Eve this year. We did fried chicken, caviar, and champagne.
Perfect.
It's just, hey.
That works really
easy.
well. All right. So take into account the pandemic. Nobody's been doing any regular stuff for 2 years. Take into account that what you do, you're a maniac as far as how many hours you need to spend, time to get to the family. Do you have any favorite wine restaurants and or bars? Places that you go into, like Slope Cellars would be the answer for a retailer. What's the answer? And whoever you mention, you're not leaving anyone out. Like if you see a buddy,
sure.
Why don't you say? But who has the list? Who's doing what you're doing? They got the vibe, they got the food, they got the knowledge.
I mean, full transparency, I think that I haven't been to a Manhattan restaurant in probably 2 years, with the exceptions of a couple of places. Woo's, which is great
because you bring your own stuff.
Exactly, which is like a cheat. But went to People's as well, and the wine list over there has been getting, it's great. And
that's
the food
the Contra Wild Air guys?
Yeah, that's Jeremiah, Fabs, and Daryl.
Right.
They have the People's, the shop as well as the restaurant.
That place fits the category, right?
Well, yeah, and recently I went there, and Sonny is doing a banchan menu over there, and I had the menu and the food. It was fucking delicious, and the wine list was a lot of fun. But here in Brooklyn, the places that I find myself often frequenting, again, in large part because of proximity, Lalu.
Joe Campanelli.
Yeah, Joe Campanelli, Dave Foss. It's a great space. The wine list there is just on point. Going down Frank's Wine Bar too.
Yes.
I love what the Franks have been doing. It's been a
John
place that I've been going to
Patterson.
for long. And John Patterson is another person who lives 2 blocks away from here in Park Slope. So we see each other all the time.
Has he picked a few chickens up?
Yeah, he's picked a few chickens up, and I've also delivered a few baguettes. So there's this nice sort of,
There you
again,
go.
that symbiotic relationship. But, those are like the places that you
Those are
immediately
all good
jump
ones.
off.
Say no more.
Yeah.
Say no more.
I
Those
won't.
are all because you can't think of any. All right. 4th question. Favorite all-time wine. When I started the show, everyone I sat down with, whether it was like Piero Antinori or Aldo Sam, I was hoping, what was the rarest, most expensive wine you ever drank? I don't care about that anymore. What's that wine that was an eye-opener, a life changer, important to you to this day? And it doesn't have to be fancy or expensive, but it has to be meaningful.
Oh, man, you're making me dig down deep.
And it could be more than one if it's like it's this and that. Was it anything in France? Was it something here?
No,
Was it Slope Cellars?
The memories that I have really where there were a lot more epiphanies.
Yeah, an epiphany wine is good.
All those occurred in Paris in that time frame.
Anything stick out?
Well, yeah, and it actually leads to another place that I think the wine list is excellent and the food is excellent, which I fucking love, which I have been to twice over the pandemic, and it is in Manhattan, so I was incorrect, but Ernesto's.
Oh,
And
man.
so Pierre Derrien, who's a dear friend of mine, I love him to death, he and I knew each other from when I was living in Paris, so we're going back to 2010, and he was working
Now,
at
who's Pierre? Is he the owner, chef?
Pierre is the somm over there.
Okay.
So he's the one responsible for the wine list over there. And we had a lot of late nights together at Bones restaurant in Paris, where, it was opening up wines and talking them through and, being outside, already quite spirited, already a couple bottles consumed, that there were certain little experiences that trigger this sort of eye-opening moments. But yeah, over at Bones, over also at Vivant, which was Pierre Joncoux, another Pierre in wine and food. There were a couple of wines out there, and there were, small ones that don't necessarily have the
It
glory
was
and
people,
fame.
time, place.
Yeah. And,
The
and I think
experience.
that was the experience.
Which validates
and it was
the
less
question that it's not about the most expensive. It's about what's important.
Yeah.
That's what you remember.
very much so.
All right, so that's a good one. So that's a broad answer. I'll chalk up that you're incapable of giving me a specific answer and move on. All right, last question, and you should be able to handle this, even though it's not your wheelhouse, but peripherally it is. I asked my guests, recommend to me best wine, 15, 20, 22 bucks retail. Now, there's a good chance you're in and out of Slope Cellars and looking at that. The setup has been, I got kids in their 20s and 30s. They can't show up at parties anymore with like crappy supermarket wine, but they can't spend 40, 50 bucks. Sure. So how do you wow at 15, 18, 20, 22? Give me a red, give me a white. You can give me a category. Like you can get in there with Chenin, you can get in there with Muscadet, or if you have a specific maker. What comes to mind? And you reflect that on the list. Maybe not that price retail, but you're looking to give value.
Yeah. That's a tough one for me, honestly.
How about category?
Well, I think when categories, I was going to say actually Muscadet, it's like one of those, ones
So
that
you-
is so often, I don't want to say undervalued, but it's priced at a point that is very accessible, and you kind of think to yourself,
overlooked
like,
sometimes.
But it's also been really cool to see a lot of these winemakers really put a lot of effort into their Negos wines and realize that, okay, you can actually go out and get a bottle, and this is not a great example, but you can get a bottle that's made by Ganavat that is coming at a far different price point than the single parcel ones that are made. Same goes even to like some of like the Darden Rebo, like some of the affiliations. It's like, here's some Negos wine. Here's the L'Art de Choix, which is a great one. The Crow's Hermitage that we had just now that we put on the list over here. Like there are wines out there that are now being made with the same principle of making excellent wine, but not necessarily paying the taxes on the sort of like hectares that have that prime location. Like at the end of the day, you're kind of paying for real estate, You know, and I think that's a great.
Yes, I mean Napa reflects that.
Yeah,
even
and Patrick's been doing a phenomenal job with that, saying like,
well,
"Hey,
that's Patrick's wheelhouse. That's
and
why
I think
he's in Sonoma.
Yeah,
and he's taking some grapes like Zinfandel and other stuff that aren't as expensive.
And I think that's
but he's making good wine.
And he's making exactly. And he's
And
showing at the
that's what
price
you're
point that
alluding
you don't
to.
have to go to California and spend X amount of dollars, and you can actually come in and get something for the under 20. Monterrio's doing a good job with that, you know.
So I was going to back you into the corner. Muscadet was the answer for white, and I agree with that. When you talk about a red, you could say a Monterrio,
Yeah, let's
Skull, or a Zin.
Yeah.
Right. You know, that's what he's doing. He's making good wines,
and not only that, he's making good wine. It's now what 2 years that he's been doing this.
Yes.
You know.
Yep.
And so
he's getting good.
You know, where's he going to be 2-3 years from now?
Well, he keeps expanding his varietals, so he's having fun. All right, so 5 good answers. I forgot to tell you this, but we post all our guest answers on social media.
Okay.
We do a whole elaborate posting, so Daniel's answers will be up in the next few days. All right, before we end the show, we do a segment called the Weekly Wine Sip. You know, a lot of times I have winemakers on or somms, and, you know, their thing is, you know, wine. I ask you to do this not to snag a free glass of wine out of you, but for you and I to have a glass of wine that sort of reflects what you like and, you know, what's going on here. So we're drinking a Morgon. Tell me a little more about the wine. Tell me vintage, maker, why you picked this wine.
La Pierre 2020 Morgon. I was lucky enough to actually do a side-by-side wine dinner with Patrick at Rebelle, which was Foyard and La Pierre. And
Love them both.
Winemakers, I forget who was there, but we had a couple of the winemakers there. But it was an incredible experience. And this actually goes back to my days at Spring. This, you know, I think that a big part of why I probably chose this is aside for the appreciation of just the ease and deliciousness of it.
Delicious is the right adjective for this one.
It also happened to be one of my mom's favorites. So, you know, it was...
So it has
that sentimental too, you know.
taste.
And this was a bottle that I had opened up for her and my sister. There were actually 2 bottles that when they came and they had Christmas dinner at Spring Restaurant. This was in 2012, I believe. But this was the bottle of red, and then the bottle of white was Domaine de Bellivier, Les Jauniers. And those were 2, and they're, you know, phenomenal wines that are delicious. And
It's crazy how well it's drinking for a 2020.
yeah, it's. I mean,
I
that's
it
the thing. A
could
lot
sit
of times,
for years, but it's delicious now.
when it's fresh, it's fresh.
And this is on the list?
This is on the list. And yeah, I picked it because it has that sort of back to that idea that we talked about, like name that place, name that wine. A lot of times it's time and place, and perhaps it's my own sort of like shitty memory that I can't remember sort of like year, vintage, this and that, but I can remember the experiences, the detail. I can tell you like which direction I was facing and where the wind was hitting and like what that evoked for me. And, you know, that night, that Christmas Eve with them sitting down in the dining room and me cooking in the kitchen is one that just brings back a lot of fond memories. And it's nice to have those fond memories coupled with something that is excellent.
So stay with the kitchen thing. So you snag 4 or 5 bottles of this. You're going to have a couple of friends over, a couple of couples. You're cooking a meal. What's the good pairing with this?
I mean, shit.
I mean, isn't this
it's roast
is this
chicken.
roast chicken, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's a given. Let's go to B, C, and D. I mean, this is pretty diverse. You could eat a piece of roasted salmon or something.
Yeah, you
with
could
it.
have a fucking pizza pie, you know.
This is
like
pretty.
It's that's the beauty of
It's
it too.
not
It's
as
like
heavy as a Cab or Bordeaux.
No,
it
it has-
isn't necessarily as light as a Burgundy or as nuanced.
it's fresh enough to drink on its own, and it's fresh enough to hold up against different foods. So to have something that is made in this style with those sort of like principles that we'd like to adhere to, you know, from the farming practices to the belief of what it's meant to be.
He's one of the original, 4 guys.
Yeah.
That really, put a focus towards viticulture.
And that's important. And if you take that sort of same principle towards the food, you can kind of make the food work really well with it.
All right, so here's what I'm going to dream about tonight. I'm going to dream about a winter rotisserie chicken cut up with salsa verde and about a 5-year-old Foillard Côte de Puy. That's my dream, all right? Is that good?
That's a good
I may
one.
even
That's a good one.
forego the vegetables and the baguette just to drink the wine.
But the chicken fat potatoes, you got to get in there.
Chicken fat potatoes.
You know.
There you go. All right, so that's thank you to you for pulling out a 2020 La Pierre Morgon. And this is just, the regular Morgon, and it's drinking really well out of the bottle. We like this wine a lot, right? We do. All right, Daniel, I told you way more than an hour would go quickly. We got to wrap up the show. I want to do a quick wrap up, then I want to get some info from you, and we'll take it from there. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at samatthegrapenation.com. That's Sam at the Grape Nation. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. On Instagram, we're at SBenRuby, and on Twitter, we're at BenRuby. I know it's a little confusing. That's why you can get to us on the hashtag The Grape Nation on both. As I mentioned, we'll post Daniel's wine list and the weekly wine sip selection on our social media sites. Daniel, I can't think that people weren't a little intrigued from this. So if they want to get more info on you, follow you on social, get more info on the restaurants, come by, order stuff, where do we go?
Yeah, check out winter.nyc and keep a lookout for the Winter Wine Series that's going to be starting very soon.
That was on my list of questions to ask you, and just because so many things, and I talked to Marshall a little about it. You've done a few wine dinners here with friends. I asked if you guys are going to continue to do that because of the food and the wine, and you have a terrific space up here. So starting when you're going to do some organized wine dinners, thematically, right? Starting
in February, and that's in a big part to John Kelly, who's my som here now. Now he's really taken ownership of kind of continuing that wine list, and he worked with Patrick at Pearl and Nash and at Rebel, and so he's already come up with like a month's worth of wine dinners. We'll be doing one a week, keeping it cheap and cheerful.
So let's imagine that for a second. You see it online, it sounds good, type of wine you want, you sign up. You're talking about what, an intimate thing? Under 20 people?
Oh, yeah, we're talking about like 12
14.
12 to 14
to
people
pour
most.
out a bottle or two, whatever,
Exactly.
And then paired with
food.
With food,
Yeah.
all the way to the end, and a little discussion and education and all that, right?
Yeah, less on the discussion, less on the education.
Well, I don't mean that in a heavy hand. I mean, it's the guy next to you, and John will also walk
It's
you
really
through.
like bringing that conviviality to the table that's around people wanting to drink good wine and eat good
all right,
food.
so if I want to keep track on that, where am I going? Winter, New York City, winter.newyorkcity.com.
Winter.nyc.
Oh, no. The NYC is the .com.
Yeah, exactly.
Winter NYC. Okay, so I recommend keep an eye on that. All right, just a few notes before we go. Hang in there for this. Winebow Imports will be hosting the 10th anniversary of their Women in Wine Leadership Symposium on Monday, January 24th. We like to support that. The mission of this virtual symposium is to create a forum to discuss the experiences, opportunities, and challenges women face and strategize about how to build a more diverse, inclusive, and successful industry for everyone. To join this symposium, go to womenwineleaders.com. That's womenwineleaders, one word, .com for more info. And lastly, my friends Daniel Johns and Raj Vaidya, they are doing a La Table this year, which is a celebration of wines of the Rhone Valley, North and South. January 26th through January 29th in New York City. There are still some tickets available for the grand tasting, the gala dinner, and some select seminars. They did some lunches and dinners. Those sold out. So go to latable.com for more info. That's LATABLEENYC.com for more info. Now, you raised your arms up. I know we're both big Rowan friends.
Well, I'm cooking that dinner.
So... so the gala dinner is...
So the gala dinner,
Oh, man, I didn't even know that.
Billy,
That's pardon my ignorance on that. So there's a big grand tasting during the day, and then everyone takes a break, and then there's this big gala dinner where people bring bottles, and they provide bottles, and they bring in the best chefs. So you are doing the dinner for that.
With Daniel Boulud and Billy Durney. So it's going to be a fun night.
What's Billy making?
He's making the main course.
Really?
Yeah, so I got the mid, and Daniel's got the app.
That is a rocking lineup, man. Wait, Balloon's doing what?
He's doing the first course, and then I'm doing the second.
He got relegated to the appetizer.
It starts off with DB, then goes into DE, and then BD at the very end, So
good news. This is coming up in a few weeks, and there's still a few tickets left for that dinner. I mean, based on the price and the amount of wine, it's a pretty good deal. So that's La Table, NewYorkCity.com. All right, we got to wrap up. I want to thank my guest, Daniel Eddy. Daniel is the proprietor of Winner and runner-up. Thank you to our engineer, Kevin, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. And thanks for listening.